What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Hope you guys are all having a wonderful day. I'm actually starting to prepare for my move to Southern California. That's probably going to happen sometime later this month. And LA is a pretty interesting place to move to. You know, there's all kinds of places to be and cities to choose from, and I'm actually really excited. But anyway, enough of that. Today we're taking a look at 9 abilities that should potentially be on a different champion. There's been a ton of reworks recently, and we've looked at a lot of future reworks on this channel in previous videos, and there's actually quite a few abilities that exist in League of Legends that just kind of make you think, why the heck is this on that champion? And yeah, okay, not all of these abilities are actually bad inherently. In fact, a lot of them are pretty dang powerful and well designed. It's more that they kind of have conflicting interests with the champion's playstyle or their gameplay design, and they don't really make sense for that champion in particular. As well, just a heads up, when this video goes live, I'm going to be giving away $100 worth of RP for all regions, and it's super easy to enter. Just check the link in the description, and if you enjoy the video, hit that like button, and if you don't, hit that dislike. This topic starts off with a couple of posts from Riot Meddler on the forums, as do a lot of my videos to be honest, but anyway, he commented on a thread with a fairly similar topic about how Urgot's ultimate doesn't really make sense on him, and it would be a much better fit for a champion that functions well being in the middle of the enemy team. And he said that it's a decent skill, it's just that it's not on the right character. And I mean, that's totally true, right? Urgot's ultimate makes no sense for a champion who's supposed to be kind of like an alternative to a ranged carry. I guess Urgot's like a ranged AD caster, and as a result he's not entirely tanky. Sure, he gets some tank stats and he has some okay survivability, but he's no Malphite, he's no Scion for sure. So an ability that puts you smack in the middle of the enemy team quite often puts you smack in the middle of your death recap too. And Meddler would also go on to say that in the Urgot rework, it's likely that they're going to replace his ultimate and keep parts of his base kit as well, and that kind of got me thinking, you know, apart from Urgot's ultimate, what other abilities are there in the game that are just kind of misplaced or maybe don't really make sense for the champion that they're on, despite the fact that they might actually be pretty interesting abilities? Urgot's ultimate is definitely one of the best examples of that, so big thanks to Riot Meddler for that one. Another ability that doesn't entirely make sense on the champion that it's on is Ezreal's W. After a lot of nerfs, it's become this really weird utility spell that doesn't even make sense half the time, since attack speed is a stat that a ton of characters can't really make use of, let alone the supports that you're going to be laning with as Ezreal. But even when this ability was released, when it had a heal on it and when it lowered the attack speed of its opponents, it didn't entirely make sense either. This is an ability that would have just been much better suited to that of like a support champion most likely, or maybe like a supportive jungler or something, certainly not an AD carry. However, what is true is that Ezreal's W does make a lot more sense when you're playing as AP Ezreal, so maybe Ezreal being an AD carry was never actually that intended, and the design for Ezreal kind of shifted and Riot decided that they liked his AD playstyle anyway, and they wanted to keep it. I mean, who knows what happened. One thing for sure is that Ezreal's W is really weird and oftentimes almost useless when you're playing him as an AD carry, and it's the type of ability that could work a lot better on a support or a different type of champion. Another ability that doesn't entirely make sense to me is Annie's Molten Shield actually. It actually did get a lot better with their update recently though, but even still it just feels so out of place in her kit and honestly doesn't even make all that much sense thematically. Annie's a burst mage champion, so a solely defensive spell oftentimes doesn't help her at all because she's going to be insanely squishy regardless, and oftentimes it does kind of contradict with her playstyle. More often than not, you just use it to get an extra stack for her stun without ever really even considering the damage mitigation. It also doesn't really do that much to help her playstyle of just trying to nuke people down, and I'm honestly surprised that they didn't change her Molten Shield into a completely new ability with her rework, or I guess update, whatever you want to call it. I guess it's kind of because it's hard to know what spell to replace it with, since honestly the rest of Annie's kit is already so strong that the fact that her Molten Shield is almost useless in most situations is kind of a blessing and a curse. It definitely helps make her more balanced for sure, but it doesn't change the fact that that type of ability makes a lot more sense on a tank character or like a bruiser type of character. I mean, it's quite comparable to Rammus's W, which is an ability that fits very well on Rammus's kit, but of course Rammus is a much different champion to Annie, and it's weird to see that type of ability on a burst mage. Burst mages typically are a bit interesting in terms of their playstyle since they are kind of comparable to assassins. You know, they have a similar amount of kill pressure, but usually the difference is that burst mage mages like Annie, Lux, and Syndra are immobile with the trade-off of having strong crowd control as the benefit, whereas, the typical assassin's hypermobile and generally has poor crowd control, and a strictly defensive ability is just so weird and doesn't entirely make sense on either of those types of champions. Alright, I'm kind of rambling now, so let's try and see if we can speed up the list a little bit and get to the end a little bit quicker. And the next ability that should probably be on a different champion is Fizz's passive. This ability doesn't really do anything for an assassin who's hypermobile and always jumping around. I mean, Fizz just never cares if he gets creep blocked, right? Because his mobility will overcome it anyway, and the damage reduction really doesn't do all that much since he's an assassin. The fights that he's in never really lasts all that long. This ability would make a lot more sense on someone like Rammus, Udyr, or Volibear, champions that try to run up and engage a target but are also very easy to kite. The removal of having to worry about creep block would be an awesome quality of life improvement for those champions, and the damage reduction from the basic attacks would also be a lot more meaningful, since those types of champions will often just straight up tank dozens of basic auto attacks throughout a fight, whereas Fizz might get hit by like 3, maybe 4 max, and that's only if he fails to kill his target. By then he's already dead anyway, and the passive does totally nothing for him, and it's just so weird that he has this in his kit. And another one that we have is Mordekaiser's W. This ability actually made a decent amount of sense when Mordekaiser was first initially reworked, but after a lot of changes, in the state that it's in today as I'm making this video, this ability feels like it could be a much better fit on a champion like Alistar or Taric, a tanky support type of character. The extra XP bonus is totally intended for the bottom lane, but Mordekaiser isn't even a bottom lane champion anymore, and it's not really an ability you would want on a ranged AD carry, so putting it on a tanky melee support would be a much better fit and make a lot more sense. But I mean, to be fair, Mordekaiser's in a spot where he doesn't really make much sense of anything after his rework kind of flopped. And another one we have is Kog'Maw's passive. Now this one's a little bit weird just because I'm not entirely sure what type of champion it would even make sense on. An ability that rewards you for dying is just so weird and counterintuitive, and it's so hard to make sense of that for anyone really. I mean, it works well with Karthus for sure, but that's only because it lets Karthus guarantee that he gets his ultimate cast in a fight and finish people off. I mean, imagine Karthus passive where you couldn't actually use his ultimate during it. It would be a lot less powerful, and his entire dynamic would change completely to where it would just be so weird and so out of place. And Kog'Maw's passive is honestly a lot more like Zyra's old passive anyway. It just makes no sense for that type of gameplay to exist. I mean, I guess it makes sense thematically, which is why it's there, but think about it. Kog'Maw's passive is only ever useful when you die. So if you do not die, this ability is completely useless, and because of that, every Kog'Maw player wants to play every game for the entire game without ever making use of this ability. It's an ability that you very much want to be useless, and where's the excitement and the fun gameplay in that? It's just such a weird and counterintuitive ability in and of itself, but again, I'm not exactly sure where you could even put this ability on someone else instead. And the next ones are actually a set of abilities that don't really make sense being on the same champion together. Individually, both abilities are actually quite awesome and really interesting and create some interesting gameplay, but it's the fact that the two abilities are on the same champion together that results in it making pretty much no sense, and I'm talking about Nunu's Q in combination with Nunu's W. Now this combination of two abilities is maybe one of the most counterintuitive set of things that exists in the entire game, since no matter what you do, you're always going to be in a spot where one of the two abilities is completely useless since they do entirely different things. If you're playing support Nunu, your Q is just so weird and just pretty much useless, and if you're playing jungle Nunu, your W doesn't really do anything to help you until you actually get to team fights, where in the team fights your Q is going to be useless. So no matter what situation you're in or what role you're playing as Nunu, you're left feeling as if you just have one less ability overall. His Q individually is a fantastic jungling ability that creates a really interesting and really awesome jungle playstyle, honestly. And his W individually is a fantastic support ability that makes him bring a unique and really powerful effect to the support role, but putting the two of them together just doesn't really work all that well, and it's why Nunu isn't always such a random spot in the game. Either he's totally broken or he just never sees play, which is a shame honestly, because Nunu is actually a very unique champion, and I would love to see a Nunu rework that maybe turns him into a full-on jungler or perhaps a full-on support, changing his W or Q respectively. And there you have it. Now this list is honestly just my thoughts, so I'd love to hear what you guys think about the abilities we mentioned in this video, as well as if there are any other abilities that should maybe be on a different champion as well. Leave a comment, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
We'll be right back.